deserve such disparaging comments, since the heir had resorted to his own powers for the sake of his mother. Lavia will be very happy, more than anything else. She and the prince have in common their love for her. Lavia was the previous empress of Lantius and the crown prince's birth mother, and was also a longtime friend of Nisha Lantius. In the year when the crown prince turned 6, the empress met an unfortunate fate and left this world. The little prince remembered that terrible time well, because after the death of his mother, Nishi became much more irritable. After some time, she seemed to have returned to her previous state. However, the black darkness continued to grow inside her. Nishi couldn't accept Lavia Lantius' death, and the denial became a terrible obsession. The Mirror of Lantius, appearing together with the fire demon during the second full moon of the month. At night, when the full moon shines white high in the sky, the influence of the sea god is significantly strengthened. The prince offered his aunt the resurrection of Lavia Lantius, the most powerful mage in the history of the empire, a man who wields the fertile magic of the earth attribute that gives life. The crown prince, Lantius's own son, is capable of performing unimaginable miracles with his own hands. That day, the moon was especially beautiful, on the birthday of the demigod emperor, whose power and strength sparkled in the solemn atmosphere of the holiday. The empress was finally able to enjoy what was rightfully hers for the first time in 10 long years. On that magical night, festive lights lit up the sky above the capital. However, there was something that they all conveniently forgot about. It's past midnight. Today is the day one woman left this world forever. And someone never forgot about her for a single fleeting moment. The man said that the Duchess was supposed to return. She tried not to show it, but she was probably very depressed. The blonde also spent a lot of energy and felt lousy. The 5-year-old crown prince hugged his birth mother. She told him that her son would definitely become a wonderful ruler. The woman thought that the boy was very upset because she had not been able to be with him lately. But she had told him everything 2 years ago, and the prince was already an adult and understood everything. A man should certainly concentrate on pressing matters. It was as if Mother had declared war, and the prince wondered how long the two of them could hold out. The knight asked if His Highness had not agreed to help them, but the blonde was just doing what he thought was right. He wasn't sure if it would actually help them. It was personal, so the prince could not afford unnecessary details. By all appearances, the ball went well, and even Her Majesty was able to enjoy herself. Unfortunately, they did encounter some difficulties, as this morning an endless stream of letters poured into the palace. Every single one of the aristocrats who were in close relations with Erica had problems with the estate territory, fires, robberies, etc. In the end, all this will force the Empress to postpone all social events. The Empress was angry because this was Nisha's machinations again. She wondered why the Duchess had gone quiet, but before she had mocked the Empress, and now she was reaching out with her nasty little hands to those closest to her. It has been especially calm in recent days, although it died down for a short time, and now it has begun to act. One maid suggested that it might have something to do with the anniversary of the death of the previous Empress. That is why no public holidays are scheduled before or after the Emperor's birthday. It just so happened that the Empress died on the eve of the Emperor's birthday. No wonder. The servant heard that a special relationship developed between the Duchess of Eris and the late Empress, which is probably why the Duchess was not particularly active in social circles during this period. A lot of thoughts are spinning in the brunette's head, but she thinks that she shouldn't jump to conclusions. The prince asked what their current plan was. There was no clear plan now. Her Majesty also needed to catch her breath, and for some reason the dress that the maid had ordered for the walks had not arrived, so in the afternoon, she was instructed to visit Viscountess Venus. The girl asked why they had called her since they all knew she was busy. The blonde said that he called her just like that because he missed her. Lately, the crown prince has been behaving very strangely, just calling people over to chat about nothing whenever he feels like it. The prince missed her and would never believe that people would talk about such things at a business meeting. The blue-eyed woman thought the man was horny. The lady thanked the man for taking her to her destination. There were a lot of people gathered near the studio, and the lady tried to squeeze through the crowd. Parisa was told that it looked like thieves had broken into the store the previous night. This happened after the girl arrived at work. All the dresses were ruined, and the Viscountess was shocked and lost consciousness. Here, even without investigation, it was clear that this was revenge against those who treated Her Majesty well. The maid decided that she first needed to take the women inside and disperse the crowd that had gathered. 2 hours later, the redhead thanked Menzel and apologized for the promised dress, but nothing could be done, and the girl thought that the Empress would understand everything. She asked if the owner of the studio had any idiots who could be a criminal, because they would not sit idly by, so it was worth trusting them because the lady would make every effort to restore the woman's peace of mind. The brunette was upset that nothing worked out with the dress and was wondering what could be done about it. What should we do with Her Majesty now, since Menzel didn't think that so much would come at once? That won't do. In that case, the blue-eyed one will entertain her herself. Be it a prank, foolishness, or a trick, whatever. The blue-eyed girl asked the coachman to take her to the Empress's palace, and if possible, to go faster. The lady was suddenly grabbed by the hands by some guys, because she is the person closest to Her Majesty in everything else, not indulging Nishi, and she can also become a target. The maid fought back easily, but there were too many eyes on the street for her to use her strength. The coachman noticed that there was blood on the brunette's hand and said that he only wanted to scare her. The personal servant asked only once who hired these people and what they knew about her. The guys didn't understand who she was if she didn't even blink. They called her an idiot, asking if she really thought he had come to joke with her, since he would just grab her and that would be the end of it. Parisa grabbed him by the throat and informed him that she did not know who their informant was, but that his lack of knowledge of the situation was unfortunate and an extremely useful skill. The brunette said that these mercenaries had attacked the wrong woman because she could put up a good fight. After a couple of hours, the prince again has the honor of seeing Parisa. Either way, the man had instructed them to deal with the attempted kidnapping, and violence was not only used by Parisa Menzel. All the knights were free, but the heirs wanted to talk to the maid. She asked if the prince had anything to tell her. He wanted to talk about those who attacked the girl, because instead of killing all three, she spared them. But the truth was that the fugitive could not openly injure people in a public place, and besides, they were not that dangerous. But that's not the point at all, because in the end, the lady was hurt. His Highness said that if something like this were to happen again, then she should not remain silent, but tell him. The man swore that he would get rid of anyone who dared to touch the lady, so quietly that no one would know about it. To this, the blue-eyed one asked His Highness not to give such terrible promises, because how could one waste strength on such dirty plans? But the prince cannot think of such a thing when it comes to his mother's personal servant. The girl admitted that, in fact, everything was fine with her, because the sword's aura also gave her the ability to heal. She didn't talk much about it, thinking that people might find it strange, and she made the blonde worry in vain. The green-eyed man said that now was the time to pay them back. He provided the brunette with a lot of help, and a lot of it, and therefore hopes for a fair reward. He didn't ask for anything complicated, just to call him by name. The maid left the room, blushing, and said goodbye to the knight who stood behind the door. Sir Claude had no idea what they were talking about, but asked not to take the man's anger out on him. The prince did not understand what he had done wrong. He would have been happy if everyone had called him by name. It would be necessary to order all the maids to memorize the list of names and surnames of the members of the imperial family. Generally speaking, this is an integral part of the training of any nobleman. There is no connection with the need to teach this to maids of noble origin. However, if Parisa is from Dunamis, she may well not know this, which is probably why she did not fulfill this request, even if she had not objected. The man asked Claude if he thought Lady Menzel might like him. He replied that the answer depended on what the prince wanted to hear from him, since he served him after all. Red said that she looked excited, but he doubts that she likes His Highness. At the moment, he clearly does not have the kind of relationship with her in which there is room for selfless love. The boy asked what His Highness had done to win her favor, to which he replied that he had danced with her at the ball. It was unthinkable. As usual, one dance was more than enough for a lady to develop romantic feelings for him. The blonde knew there was something special about Paris. Looking at all this, Claude did not believe that such a thing was even possible. The prince said that everyone would be happy to show up at his aunt's ball, so there was no point in asking his advice, but she was obliged to ask, since the ball was held in honor of the heir. Nishi was sure that the man had already found himself a daughter-in-law. She kept thinking about how she could help him. After all, she was his aunt. She decided to organize a ball aimed at choosing a spouse. The heir to the throne and other aristocrats who have reached the appropriate age for marriage give balls in order to find a partner, an event that attracts many unmarried ladies and gentlemen from all over the country, where the most successful, sometimes unique chance to improve their status sometimes falls. Alas, the guy doesn't want this at all now, not to mention that recently such things have not been her prerogative, but Nishi again wants to secretly take away her mother's business. The Empress's stress levels were high, and she had no other way to vent her anger than by drawing. The lady reported that a guest had arrived to see Her Majesty, but she did not wish to see anyone. Parisa still asked to meet her, This is the lady she mentioned a couple of days ago. The woman apologized for keeping the guest waiting. The Viscountess's pupil came to see her, and it was a great honor for her to meet Her Majesty. The Empress had been in a very bad mood lately. She understood that the dress had been ruined not by the will of the Viscountess, but many of her plans had been ruined. Well, now it didn't make any sense. Parisa didn't invite this girl here for nothing. The lady was confident that she could handle it, so she asked him to rely on her. If you sew on fabric torn from a dress in some way, you will get a design that is popular today. Erica was speechless. It was immediately obvious that she was the Viscountess's best student, and she would never have thought that it was possible to create a new dress from scraps of an old one. The brunette was a girl who didn't fit into the girly conversation at all. But Menzel was glad that the Empress was better, to which the woman asked her to provide Nora with a guest room. For a while, everything should be fine. Parisa will also be safe as long as she is in the Empress's palace. The maid held the gift box in her hands, surprised that it had returned so soon. Anna's presence here was strange, because there was no way to get to the maid's dormitory from here, but she was asked to pass on a regular gift. As it turned out, the Crown Prince himself decided to give Menzel a luxurious dress. In the letter, he wrote that it was stupid of him, but all because at any moment he could call the maid to his office. Of course, he will always do exactly this from now on, but today, man, you were a little busy. This dress was his gift, for the fact that soon there would be a ball, where a selection of a bride would be organized especially for him. They will give a ball at which the Crown Prince intends to find himself a chosen one, and he wants Parisa to come to him in the dress he gave her. His Majesty decided to write again, because he assumed that the girl might misunderstand him. If her mother was also going to be present at the ball, then she should definitely come too. The people in the Lantius Empire are terribly wasteful. The brunette already has an indecently large number of dresses. It was difficult to find a dress the color of Lady Menzel's eyes, so the prince was very eager for her to wear it. The girl received a letter from the Lantius Empire, which was quite unexpected, since she was not even the heir to the throne. The news about the opening of the ball to choose a bride for the Crown Prince of the Lantius Empire reached the representatives of neighboring states. The maid informed Her Highness that she should not so carelessly tear up an official letter, but she had already read it, calling the contents complete nonsense. Their women have no need to look for a man outside the borders of the kingdom, even if there was. Then for nothing in the world would the girl send the unfortunate women to this shameful ball. Each princess reacted differently. For example, the princess of the Oligot kingdom, Joanna, was happy. This news stirred the feelings of the ladies all along the coast of Aigais. This ball is a harbinger of future unrest. A week before the ball, the blonde thought only about how he wanted to see Parisa. But he still had a lot of work to do, to which he grumbled about the fact that he hadn't seen her for a whole week. The lack of news was already good news after all. She was now busy preparing for the ball too. The girl told that the Viscountess's best student had caught Her Majesty's eye. As far as the lady knew, nothing special had happened, and the revenge of the Duchess of Arras that broke out immediately after the Empress's ball. It seems that everything has calmed down in connection with the beginning of preparations for the next imperial ball. Something tells the man that the maid will not obediently follow the plan, because the Duchess has invited not only the heirs to the throne, but all the princesses of the kingdoms with which trade is conducted will be present. An exceptional opportunity to establish diplomatic relations. It is quite expected that the aunt will organize this ball in order to tie her nephew hand and foot. He could not have failed to know what their relationship was like. The prince remained neutral, but all this clearly happened because he sided with the Empress. She must be thinking that this is a perfect opportunity for her, since he is the crown prince. So it is unacceptable for him to cause unnecessary trouble, however. Even if the situation turns out badly, Lantius, as a powerful country, will not suffer any losses. It was even interesting how all this would turn out. The green-eyed man was worried about something completely different, no matter how senseless his worries were. The prince asked if he was really going to do something reckless, asking to be let in on it and given a chance to prepare mentally. But the heir to the throne was not going to do anything, because he did not want to put pressure on Paris. Besides, he can't expose the lady in public. He'll get involved in a conflict at the state level, and her safety will be at stake, which is most likely what Nishi wants. Then, as a warning against the actions of the Duchess of Arras, a man should choose a woman who in the future will not be involved in various kinds of gossip. And if the blonde still intends to make trouble for himself, then you can look from the outside to see whether Parisa is feeling discomfort or simply indifferent. The mere thought of this torments His Highness. Of course, the girl was glad that Her Majesty was having fun, but lately she had been feeling like a mannequin. The Empress, together with the dress designer, once again came up with a new dress for Parisa. This was the outfit that the maid tried on during the day. Although the pink one doesn't want to go to the ball, she still can't refuse, so the brunette also needs a dress. It seems that her financial situation is not the best, so the woman prepared it for her. All the hype has died down, so you can just put on this dress and show up to the ball looking beautiful. The sea was surging so terribly, and people showed up at such a time. It was interesting to see what wonders they had brought them this time. These guys were not ordinary, they were clearly from Dunamis. The knight had excellent hearing, but what business did he have with the poor drinking workers? They could already guess that the man was not an ordinary knight, which is probably why they were careful with their words. He offered money for a drink because he could reward well for the information. The blonde ordered to tell everything the workers knew about the Menzel family. The socialite ladies thanked the woman for the invitation, as it was a great honor for them to receive a letter from the Duchess. The princesses were always welcome at the palace, and the Duchess dared to point out that the rumors shamelessly belittled their merits, because they were both incredible beauties. Auntie hoped that the guests would have a wonderful time. Because they are special invited guests today, the lady felt that the main heroines of this luxurious ball would be she and her sister. It was a pity for the poor things, because it was so stupid of them to entertain empty hopes. In any case, it was clear to everyone that one of these ladies would become the prince's bride. One of the invited guests overheard this conversation and concluded that these sisters were real impudent. Finally, the appearance of His Highness the Crown Prince was announced, who, as before, is unforgettable only for his dazzling face. One of the ladies was glad to meet him and expressed her respect. For the rulers of the royal family, Jess, this was the very first meeting with His Highness. The man noticed his mother in the hall, but could not find Parisa. Since the hero of the occasion had arrived, his aunt concluded that it was high time to begin the ceremony. She asked if the prince had chosen a partner for the first dance. The blonde said that if he didn't have anyone in mind, then she dared to suggest a couple of girls, to which he replied that he already had a lady for the first dance. The crown prince invited Princess Joanna Olagot to the first dance, asking her to do him the honor. To be honest, the blonde was a little nervous, because since his youth, he had dreamed of establishing intercultural interactions with them. Olagot, Lantius, and Dunamis are 3 states that have shared the blessing of the sea god among themselves. They have been forming an alliance for a long time. Frankly speaking, they have nothing to catch in other countries. Extra connections are sometimes burdensome, and a princess from an allied state is the most rational choice. It seems that Nishi has dragged princesses from other countries into this story. What a pity, the crown prince simply ignored them. After all, Parisa serves Her Majesty the Empress, not the crown prince. And unfortunately, she is not suitable for this place. Besides, it would be strange if the most ordinary servant stood out among the other ladies. Even the girl herself considered this rational and inappropriate. His Majesty did not like the fact that the maid was dancing and looking exclusively at the floor, asking if she really meant to say that her partner did not suit her. The man asked her to trust him, because if the lady made a mistake or stumbled, she could lean on him. This dance was just a perverted fantasy. In fact, the prince and princess had already finished, with a rather spectacular finale. The brunette's face was tanned, and she felt too stuffy in this situation. As soon as I went out, it became better. It was very nice in the fresh air. The lady was surprised that even outside the magical lights decorated the sky, imitating the stars, the crown prince was the main character of this evening. He was perfectly prepared, and nothing could be said to him. The maid thought about wanting to stay for a while, since it was unlikely that Her Majesty would want to be here. Nishi was apparently too carried away by the ball to plot any more intrigues, so most likely everything would work out. His Highness appeared on the terrace, saying that he had already searched for his mother's personal servant. The man was confident that the other ladies were able to wait for him a little longer. The hero of the occasion should not leave his place. This was a sign of disrespect for the guests, but letting this bride fair happen does not mean that the ball was organized exclusively for him. His absence is not a problem at all. There are many other aristocrats here, after all. The blonde could have simply left under the pretext of going to the toilet. The blue-eyed man admitted that he came here to steal the brunette's first dance. He asked not to refuse. It seemed to him that he had already proven himself to be a worthy partner. The prince kissed the stranger's hand, declaring that it was a great honor for him. Minzel hadn't drunk a drop of alcohol, but her thoughts were all jumbled up in her head, as if she were drunk. She, being a knight of Bologna, dares to rely on another person. If you think about it, the prince is probably upset because the lady did not wear the dress he gave her. The man asked if it wasn't bad manners to avoid eye contact with your companion. The crown prince asked again to be called by name, and one of the princesses saw this. That is why it was impossible to appear so indifferent, because His Highness already has a beloved. The spy wondered if he had danced the first dance with her. Then why was it necessary to arrange a ball? Finally, the girl came to the conclusion that the prince and the maid had a secret relationship, concluding that His Highness was a daredevil. Suddenly, Joanna noticed that two sisters were walking towards this place, indignant that the prince had disappeared immediately after the first dance, even though they had both been given all the guarantees. They had come all this way just because the crown prince was going to get engaged. But could someone like the Duchess lie about something like that? The girl decided to help so that the dancing couple would not get caught, but the prince should keep in mind that he would be obligated to her for the rest of his life. Seeing people nearby, Parisa immediately pushed the man away from her. The brunette said that it was time for them to go back, because if they went back together, people might get the wrong idea. The blonde touched her shoulder and informed her that he would definitely contact her again. When he left, the maid almost cried, not understanding what was happening. Because Parisa did not return, the empress was about to leave. The woman also said that if she suddenly laid eyes on some aristocrat, then she should just say so, because once she could even pretend to be a stump. Joanna spent all her energy to create that circus. The brunette noticed that Her Majesty was already leaving, although they didn't even have time to greet each other. The maids sorted the financial reports for the prince's ball and the emperor's birthday party into piles, made a preliminary plan of the upcoming expenses for their personal tea party, checked the estimate against the general expenses journal, made changes, wrote out separately. The unapproved expenses, all of them fit on one page, numbered them in descending order of importance, made a list of expenses for food for tomorrow's morning meal, lunch, and dinner. And only after all this, Parisa asked if she could be free. When the pink-haired girl finally let go of the girl, she said that they would see each other tomorrow. Her Majesty noticed that she was somehow overly excited. The lady was hurrying to her friend Anna. The makeup artist was already tired of waiting for this young lady, so she quickly created a wonderful image for her. I would especially like to mention the dress given to me by the prince. The brunette asked if it wouldn't be better to put her hair up because she didn't feel comfortable with it down like that, but it looked great, and Parisa really suited it with her hair down. The servant noticed that the blue-eyed girl had always braided her hair before, and with such a hairstyle, the girl is impossible to recognize. It seemed to Anna that the lady was especially worried about this. The girl concluded that Anna was very observant, which was surprising, and this, one could say, was her secret weapon. Here in the palace, many of even the most ordinary maids came from aristocratic families, so a girl, a commoner, has to put in much more effort than everyone else. For this, she needs to be better than other servants, at least in something. A place under the wing of the highest nobility or the royal family is a tasty morsel. It is not at all surprising that among the common people, there are daredevils who hire themselves here in the hope of patronage. A rarity, of course, but there were cases when it was necessary to please even arrogant maids. The lady asked whether, in the present situation, it would not have been wiser for Anna to follow the Duchess rather than the Empress. To which she replied that she had no power here. On the contrary, she had always had the opportunity to observe the situation from afar, and so she could act as her heart told her. Suddenly, the friend realized that at this rate, Parisa would be late, because her meeting was much more important than this conversation. Her Majesty's personal servant thanked the lady, saying that she would definitely return the favor. Yellow Eyes concluded that Minzel did not look like an aristocrat at all. One of the maids said she had a conversation that wouldn't take long. The prince was delighted that his beloved wore the dress he had given her. He was happy because it suited the girl incredibly well. The lady concluded that His Highness simply had nothing to do, but there was one place where the green-eyed man wanted to take the maid. They took a long time to climb the stairs, so the man asked if the maid was having a hard time. He asked her to tell him if things get tough because he would help the girl. The lady said that such concerns regarding the Knight of Bologna were unfounded. The only thing was that if she had known that they would go to such a place, she would have put on something more comfortable. His Highness led Minzel to the end of the pedestrian gallery, from where a simply incredible view opened up. He explained that it had become his favorite place. This view was simply amazing, so much so that it took your breath away. The prince often visited here since his childhood. It was amazing how if you looked down from here at the city for a long, long time, your consciousness magically cleared up, and sometimes the prince even came there just to think about things. The man remembers all too well the day he first met Parisa. The man said that the brunette had simply unusually beautiful eyes, as deep as the ocean, At first, it seemed to him that everything would fly into his face. The girl apologized, but said she would pretend she hadn't heard it. The Empress concluded that today was simply a wonderful day. Now that the hated paperwork is behind us, we can finally breathe deeply, because Parisa has worked hard. It all happened because the woman was able to masterfully distribute responsibilities, so this is not her merit at all, but the merit of the Empress. Her Majesty asked what the girl was working so hard on, to which she replied that she was simply making tea. Realizing that the lady was completely disorganized, the Empress declared that she was giving her a leave. She also wished to go wherever she wanted, because she needed to rest. It's all for the best. Because Parisa didn't want to cause any extra trouble, she'll be called as soon as she's needed, so there's no need to worry. The brunette realized that it was very unreasonable to worry about something like this. Besides, she, foolishly, dared to go against the wishes of the prince, and is afraid that this might somehow reflect on Her Majesty. In that very place, the girl explained that she had a purpose that she must fulfill. It was her duty, something that she had chosen herself. Blue-Eyed cannot concentrate her energy on anything else. For some reason, the blonde felt that the lady felt the same as he did. They would like to return to Her Majesty what she should not have received in the first place. Parisa returned the same dress to the crown prince, which he considered too much. If only she had said she didn't like it, and that was too cruel of her. But if she had accepted the prince's offer, she would have belonged entirely to him, and she would have definitely broken her oath. Minzel's duty is to protect Her Majesty the Empress, and by becoming the crown prince's lover, she would be betraying herself and her destiny. Yet the prince was right. The girl's mind cleared up then, in that magical place. The empire to which she fled after leaving her native Dunamis is laid out before her as if on the palm of her hand, and she is not here for nothing. The status of the crown prince's beloved is burdensome. No matter how you look at it, such a situation will attract the attention of a huge number of people. This cannot be allowed. The maid realized that she could no longer hesitate. Seeing the carriage behind the palace, the lady was surprised that Her Majesty had prepared it especially for her servant. On the other hand, worrying alone won't solve the problem. The lady decided to take a walk and clear her head, thinking that everything would be fine this way. Once she returns, we will need to focus as much as possible on Her Majesty. The brunette was very surprised that for some time now the roads in the city center were so bad. As it turned out, the carriage brought her to Nishi, who wanted to get to know her better. The woman felt very sorry, because everything happened so spontaneously. After all, this was their first meeting. The Duchess knows that this is rather rude of her, but her actions are understandable. The maid said that the blonde should have sent a letter to Her Majesty if she intended to meet. Otherwise, it would look like a spontaneous kidnapping. The woman wanted to talk to the blue-eyed woman alone, asking her to sit down. First she pursues, sends her henchmen, and now look, she kidnaps. Nishi told that Parisa Minzel was the 23rd servant of the Empress. The lady thought that this servant wanted to become the crown prince's wife. The brunette had no idea where the Duchess got this idea from. She didn't even dare to think that such stupidity was possible. But the woman guessed what was going on in the young lady's heart. The Knight of Bologna was afraid that Nishi had somehow found out about their relationship with him. The Empress has changed terribly since the Duchess returned to Lantias. However, in order to create a support group for yourself, attracting even the provincial aristocracy, it is not enough to simply be socially active. A man who has been living a reclusive life for 10 years suddenly starts taking active steps, and that's as simple as that. To her credit, she got the crown prince relatively easily. And as soon as Lady Minzel appeared, she became like a different person. The maid reported that Her Majesty had always been an intelligent and versatile person. The Empress is clearly not someone to be judged in this way. The Duchess has no right to speak of her in such a manner. Nishi laughed at this, calling Parisa a precious friend of Her Majesty. The woman suddenly confessed that she was planning to destroy the Empress. After all, who gave her the right to crawl out of her festering hole? The lady felt disgusted by this scene. She was ready to finish off her lover's aunt with her own hands right now. The lady assumed that the Duchess wanted Her Majesty to leave her position, but she could not guess her true intentions. The lady offered to become her person, if of course she was concerned about her well-being. The more courageously Parisa rushes to help, the more hostile the attitude towards her becomes, and it is unlikely that she wants this. When a viscous abomination fancies itself, pretends to be God knows what, then a woman wants to trample it. At this, Minzel stood up and said that she was leaving because she had a lot to do. Somehow, it's amazing how often I meet strange people, and besides, the girl is terribly upset. Her head is spinning. Thanks to this shrew, the lady forgot about the crown prince for a while. Since she's come this far, maybe she should buy a gift for Her Majesty. In an instant, the princess ran up to the maid. saying that she did not expect to meet her in such a place. Olagoda said that even then it seemed to her that she had already seen her somewhere, but today she was finally convinced of this. She asked what the Knight of Bologna was doing here. The lady thought she had made a mistake in saying that she would have to contact the crown princess. When Parisa still lived in Dunamis, a princess from a neighboring state came to visit the crown princess, and she was not just a relative. The girl asked what her highness wanted from her. Joanna says that such beautiful food makes her mouth water, and she has wanted to visit this place for a long time, to which Parisa says that the choice is more varied in the imperial palace. But it wasn't interesting, because the princess wanted to walk around the city center because there are so many interesting things there. Most likely, this is why the lady wandered alone, and if Minzel had been a knight accompanying her, she felt betrayed. After all, she also has a blessing, and the girl herself should understand that she does not need an escort. But still, now is just a wonderful time to visit Lantias. The brunette said that the celebration of the blessing of the 3 states will take place very soon. To maintain relations between the 3 states linked by the alliance, an annual reception is held to celebrate the triumph of the country's power and might. This time the celebration is held in Lantias, but how could Parisa forget such an important event? Yellow Eyes assumed that the knight had left Dunamis of her own free will and come to this country, and Parisa would like this fact to remain between them if possible. Besides, it would be an unfortunate omission to tell such interesting news to the crown princess for free. The girl asked the maid to be her escort today, but she was forced to refuse because it was her day off. There will be a general celebration, so the crown princess must also be present. The princess explained that there was no rule requiring a member of the royal family or the heir to the throne to attend the reception, and Joanna had not come if there had been no other business in Lantias. The crown princess never personally attended the reception, and judging by the girl's reaction, neither did Paris. People are usually reluctant to share what is dear to them. The yellow-eyed girl understood that it seemed that the brunette was not yet ready to open up to her. She wondered how the crown princess's treasure could have gotten so lost. To this, the lady replied that she had never been lost before. The princess forced Parisa to agree to accompany her, otherwise she would hand her over to the heir to the throne from the country from which the servant had fled. There are currently 6 other knights of Bologna in service, in addition to Parisa and the crown princess. The situation was complicated, but Minzel wanted to know what was going on. Finally, a representative from Dunamis arrived, a knight of Bologna. The girl reflected on the fact that people in the empire love to gossip. Some knights mentioned Parisa, which almost caused them to lose their heads, but the girl gave them another chance. A red-haired man burst into this conflict, asking her not to use her powers. Otherwise, she, without wanting to, would get herself into a lot of trouble. He thanked for the cooperation because he would personally study this case, and the perpetrators would be brought to justice. The redhead missed the moment of introduction, so he said that he was a representative of His Highness, who was entrusted with meeting the honored guests. They came at the behest of Her Highness Crown Princess Dunamis, and this blonde's name was Celine. Red stated that the girl was very welcome in Lantias. He showed her the palace where the guests of honor stay. The reception will take place in 2 days. Until then, the blonde is allowed to move freely around the grounds of the imperial palace. If she suddenly needs something, she can contact the doctor at any time. He will take care of everything. Parisa Minzel was a deceiver who had vilely fled from Her Highness and was a hated traitor. The brunette thought that Joanna spent a lot of money on shopping at Lantias, but in her opinion, it was a mere trifle. The girl was a knight of Bologna. As far as the princess knew, the salary there was not small, but she was never particularly drawn to luxury. She never needed dresses and jewelry to look decent. The lady asked if there was a significant difference in men's and women's wardrobes in Dunamis, and in Lantias, even female knights wore dresses in their free time, which was considered a luxury in her native country. But isn't it nice to sometimes dress up in beautiful dresses and wear jewelry? Parisa said that she hadn't thought about it before, but after coming to Lantias, something changed in her. Well, it's probably none of her business, Her Majesty the Empress. The blue-eyed one loved to watch her dress up. For Minzel personally, it is back-breaking work, standing for hours in front of the mirror and dressing up in different dresses. And besides, the girl tried and found out that it is not for her. The princess declared that the maid was very beautiful, and if she were dressed up just a little, then men, even those with the highest standards, would fall head over heels in love with her. In the lady's opinion, clothes should be comfortable to move in. She would rather spend this time practicing with a sword. The princess's assistant asked where she had disappeared to alone and why she had returned so quickly. Since everything worked out so well, the princess suggested that the maid report to the empress's palace. But the brunette asked that what they talked about today remain a terrible secret. But even though the brunette is not a citizen of Dunamis, she still knows what is most important for a knight of Bologna. The girl asked if her friend also had her own purpose, so she could be thanked for her understanding. But then, Her Highness will also ask the servant for something. But only if it is within Parissa's power, then she will do anything. And since they now share one secret, she suggests that they officially become friends. Blue-Eyed couldn't relax at all, but aren't weekends meant for relaxation? Even if the princess keeps her promise, the problem will not be solved, because the lady will be obliged to attend the reception, and she will definitely be discovered there. Then a terrible commotion may occur in the midst of the reception. If something like this happens, Parissa will no longer be able to be with Her Majesty. The brunette was suddenly overcome with a feeling of anxiety. Her heart began to beat so hard that it felt like needles were pricking her chest. Care must be taken to ensure that the absence of a single maid at the ball would not be much more suspicious. Bologna's knight, whoever he may be, will not linger here for long. I just had to get through this unpleasant reception. Parissa asked what happened, to which Bonnie started yelling at her for having the nerve to ask that. The lost diamond necklace of the maid Bonnie was found in Minzel's room. The girl immediately realized that this was the work of Nisha, who began to act very low. The personal maid remained unperturbed because there was no need for unnecessary worries. The brunette said that there was some kind of misunderstanding. She claimed that she was not guilty at all, and traces of a rough search were found in her room. This had happened before, but Parissa had taken it as an ordinary threat. One of the servants heard that Minzel was in a difficult financial situation. But was it really so bad in the Empress's palace that she, being Her Majesty's personal servant, decided to steal? The lady concluded that she shouldn't have stood her ground like that. Who would have thought that she would use such a pathetic method, saying that she had just returned from vacation, and if she had stolen something, she would have sold it in the city. One of the maids said that a valuable diamond necklace had gone missing, and of course, all the merchants in the city would have been checked, and Parissa must have decided to hold on to it in order to sell it when everything calmed down. The girls had insufficient grounds to recognize the brunette as a thief, because in this situation, the maid was also a victim. They are all trained against the Empress, ignoring the girl all the time so that they can later try to slander her and make her out to be a thief. If you think about it, Minzel doesn't communicate with any of them, and how could she know that one of the ladies has such a valuable thing? But Bonnie was constantly bragging about her necklace, so the Empress's personal servant could simply overhear. Everyone must have known about it because the victim spoke about such an expensive thing too often. This was complete nonsense, because Parissa had never heard of any expensive necklace. The girl asked the butler if he had found out who had destroyed her room. She said that the knight's room had been broken into before, and the intruders had taken advantage of her absence to steal the jewel. Parissa asked Marie to confirm her words. The man understood that now he would not be able to prove Parissa's innocence. He simply had to think of some way to help Her Majesty's personal servant. Instantly, the Empress became interested in the reason why the servants had created such a crowd here. The woman ordered an explanation of what was happening here in her absence. The brunette was surprised when she saw Princess Olagot next to the Empress. Her Highness said that today she had a great time with her friend, but it so happened that she dropped something in the carriage. This thing was a pass to the palace. The princess called the maid a bungler because losing such important things is simply unacceptable. The Empress did not understand what the problem was if the maid found her necklace, but she was so convincing that she was now afraid to be near Parissa. The girls started talking about how they didn't know when something like this would happen again. The pink-haired girl asked her servant if she had anything to say. The lady was sorry for the inconvenience, but Her Majesty decided that they would definitely resolve this misunderstanding later. However, since the Empress herself has now taken up the matter, the punishment will follow accordingly. The lady noticed that something was wrong with Parissa. She was barely breathing and holding her chest. Blue-Eyed was afraid that Her Majesty would be disappointed in her. If she doesn't believe, if the Empress doubts her, then what should she do? Princess Olagot said that she would be able to help the ladies. It was not difficult, because the divine blessing of Olagoth can show where the truth is. The woman could not believe that her personal maid had been snatched from under her nose in broad daylight. She promised that she wouldn't just leave it like that. The lady ordered that the criminal be punished properly, so Parissa had nothing more to worry about. If the princess so wishes, her spirit will tell her who the real criminal is. Princess Joanna cannot lie, especially when it comes to the power that represents the kingdom of Olagot, and now things will move faster. The situation has finally become clear. The real culprit turned out to be a maid named Pei. The spirit is simply incapable of lying, so all excuses are meaningless. If you think about it, all ordinary maids, in addition to their personal room, share one room. And Bonnie's roommate was, in fact, Pei. Then she must have known exactly where the diamond necklace was. So the redhead stole it and threw it into Parissa's room. Suddenly, the culprit screamed that she hated her roommate because she threw trash around the room. Yesterday, the girl discovered with horror that larvae were crawling around in the corners, and all because Bonnie never throws out the trash on time. She said that she always blamed all the cleaning on the redhead, and she couldn't stand it anymore. In that case, the blue-eyed girl asked what Pei had forgotten in her room, since they had brought in a brunette, someone who had nothing to do with it, and didn't they think that this was a problem that normal people would solve without involving outsiders? The door to the personal maid's room was open, and the redhead didn't even think twice. Be that as it may, the girl stole someone else's thing, and what's more, she tried to make an innocent person look like the thief. The punishment will not be limited to simple dismissal. Also, the Empress stated that from now on, these maids will not work here. But the ladies themselves made it clear that they could no longer live with Parissa under the same roof. After all, no one can know when something like this will happen again. There are still servants and maids left in the palace, and their temporary employees are doing quite well. The Empress hoped that Parissa was not offended by the fact that she did not immediately take her side. But the maid was no longer afraid. The main thing was that now the woman trusted her again. another country, and the situation did not turn out well, and the servants could seriously injure the brunette. Olagot said that anyone would trust such a knight. Just look into her eyes, because her clear blue eyes reflect a pure soul. It immediately becomes clear how kind Parisa is. That's why the girl helped her earlier. She is immensely grateful to the girl for this, because if the princess had not revealed the truth, the brunette would have been falsely accused. By the way, Yellow-Eyed lied that day. Blue Eyes told about what she had heard before about the blessing of Olagoth and about the elementals. Each spirit is unique, however, as far as she knows. Their power is not in magic, but in physical strength. Compared to the other maids, Pei stands out with her excitement. It's lucky that, having lost her head, she spilled it all herself. The girl did not understand how it was possible to set up Her Majesty's personal servant like that. The lady asked that this remain between them, but a lady can be frank with a princess because they are friends. Parisa suddenly wondered if she could tell strangers about this. She was not doing the best thing, but she decided to tell everything. The princess did not understand where so much bile came from in that woman, and how the emperor's sister could act like that. But at the ball that Duchess Eris personally organized for the crown prince, they greeted each other so sweetly. So the woman seemed like a real sweetheart to her, and who would have thought that she was so cruel? But where is His Majesty the Emperor looking? Is he really unable to stand up for his beloved wife? But the personal maid stopped the girl, pretending that she had not heard anything that was said. Her Highness realized that the lady was forced to work in such hellish conditions, and that Parisa must have a hard time. Either way, the blue-eyed one was able to cope with her anxiety by asking to keep their conversation a secret, just like the fact that she was a knight of Bologna. The princess thought it would be better to reveal herself, then no one would dare even try to harm her. She was sure that Her Majesty would be much calmer, but the girl was no longer a knight, but an ordinary servant. At this rate, Parisa will be driven away, so that she does not inadvertently harm Her Majesty. Her Highness stated that Minzel was making things very difficult. She hides absolutely everything, both the reason why the lady left in Amis and the truth about her past. So why did the girl take on the burden of responsibility for the problems of an entire empire? Suddenly, the groom announced that they had already traveled around the entire territory, and there was nothing left to see. The maid suggested visiting the Imperial Gallery. There were few people today, perhaps because it was only morning. The brunette heard that there was an exhibition today, and the theme was determined personally by His Highness the Crown Prince. The ladies found an exhibit that, however, had an impressive name. Suddenly, Olagot noticed that one of the paintings depicted Parisa Minzel. It seems that this exhibition was created in honor of the hysteria of the personal servant of the Empress and His Highness, the Crown Prince. Yellow Eyes thought that the maid had dared to tell her the truth, and so she recommended this place. The lady stated that her friend's destiny was love. After all, even the steadfast knight of Bologna is unable to resist the power of love. Suddenly, the girl felt a familiar aura and fear pierced her chest. The blonde from Bologna came up and asked with horror what Parisa was doing here. Rudolf and Natasha said that Parisa's skills were impressive, no matter what. After just a few fights with Her Highness, Natalie is exhausted and has no more strength left. But everything was even the opposite, because her fights with Parisa only gave her strength. The lady said that she wanted to discuss another matter with the Knight of Bologna. The blonde cursed the girl, because she works like hell and it's all in vain. The hated traitor of Her Highness. You couldn't imagine anything worse, because out of all the candidates, it was she. The princess ordered the Knight of Bologna to stop immediately and think carefully about who she was threatening now. The red-eyed woman said that the princess was bothering her, and that it was none of her business, but Dynamis's personal business. But it was still her business, because the girl wanted to harm Her Highness's friend. They had arranged God knows what here, and she would not watch from the sidelines. Celine said that Parisa had no right to pretend that nothing had happened in her past, noticing her pathetic costume, which was unbecoming for a Knight of Bologna. The brunette said that she currently works as a maid in the imperial family of Lantius. Technically, her outfit is not much different from what she wears. The blonde screamed that the servants didn't even know how angry Her Highness was, and that the fact that she wasn't caught that very second was just luck, or a miracle, and nothing else, because the Princess of Bologna would have immediately torn the lady to shreds with her own hands for such a betrayal. And if she had caught sight of the blue-eyed girl, and in such a state, everything that the girl had so cleverly managed to avoid would have happened, because the proud Knight of Bologna had cowardly fled the country a couple of years ago in order to become an errand girl. Celia called Parisa a traitor who abandoned her and Her Highness, ran away like a rat, and all for the sake of some worthless love. The knight got angry because the lady didn't know anything about her, And why the hell was she even opening her dirty mouth? The Crown Prince stopped this conflict by saying that the respected Knight of Bologna was an honored guest, of course, and yet there was no need to make unnecessary noise. The man assumed that the ladies so desperately wanted him to visit them in person. Unfortunately, he saw no other reason to use force so openly. The prince ordered Parisa to take the trouble to explain what was going on here. The girl said that she had accompanied Her Highness Joanna to the exhibition, that's all. The blonde man personally takes care of escorting the guests of honor, so he decided to escort the guest. But suddenly, Celia grabbed the brunette by the hand and declared that she would immediately return home and report that Parisa had been hiding here all this time. She will wipe that haughty expression off her face. The prince asked if his mother was with them. Joanna said that she had lent it to Paris for today only and was giving her a tour of the imperial palace grounds. The princess thought that the man was not at all surprised, as if he had known everything for a long time, but the lady conveyed the information that she had been exposed long ago. In that case, he would like to invite both of them to the Crown Prince's palace and sincerely hoped that the ladies would accept his invitations. The girl couldn't understand how this had happened at all, but since they have a sightseeing day today, why not include the Crown Prince's palace in the program? The blonde insisted, because the sun was shining so brightly outside today, and the palace garden was especially beautiful. He suggested having tea in the garden after lunch. The princess decided to cover for her friend and said that she had completely forgotten that she already had plans for this afternoon. But suddenly, Joanna announced that Parisa could go instead of her. After these words, the princess said goodbye and ran away. She is a foreign princess, no matter how you look at it, and you can't offend her, but the knight's fists are already itching. The man said that even now, with the maid next to him, he could not pretend that nothing had happened. He asked her to simply answer where her heart was then. It is either in the country she left behind, or it was taken by the prince's mother. The prince had hoped, even if only a little, but the lady opened it for her. Blue-Eyed declared that her heart belongs to herself. The blonde extended his hand to the lady and declared that he did not plan to give up so easily. The brunette remembers the time spent training, how much effort was spent to become a knight of Bologna. Unlike the blessings of Lantius and Olagoth, in Dunamis the matter does not end with just awakening. Only a select few are endowed with the sword's aura, but it is up to the individual whether he or she will reach the pinnacle of mastery or not. After many trials, the day comes when the knight learns his destiny. Something inside Parisa made it clear that she must follow her duty. This is the path that is destined for her, and the blue-eyed one will walk this path with dignity. This is her destiny. But this bright light blinds the girl again and again. His assistant ran up to the carriage, saying that it was fortunate that the man had arrived, but he urgently needed to pass on something. The blonde felt sorry that the lady had to come all this way here. Unfortunately, he had urgent business, and the prince was forced to withdraw the invitation. The green-eyed man apologized and asked her to return to her mother, namely to go back to the Empress's palace. Claude spoke in a whisper, but Parisa clearly heard words about someone's death. The Empress learned that the maid who falsely accused Minsel was dead. The details were completely unknown, but if she was killed, then it was definitely Nisha's doing. Her Majesty considered this outrageous. Did the prince not interrogate this servant after all? She instructed him in a letter to sort out this whole misunderstanding. This was the prince's own area of responsibility. The woman was confident that she was safe. Nishi was becoming more and more cruel every day. They don't know for sure yet, of course, but Parisa asked if they were right. Then what was the Duchess up to? That was the whole problem, because none of them knew what was on her mind. Suddenly, the knights burst in, ordering Parisa Minsel, his personal servant, to follow them. The Empress was informed that this was an order from His Majesty the Emperor, and was also instructed to accompany his wife. It seems that Parisa now understands what exactly Nishi is up to. His Majesty asked if the personal servant had any idea why she had been summoned to the imperial palace. The brunette said that unfortunately she had no idea, so she wanted to know the reason. They examined the girl's documents and discovered some suspicious details. Due to the lack of information about her past, the necessary people were sent to the Minsel family estate. As a result of the investigation, it turned out that the estate was empty and the lady's family had moved away long ago. The man asked if Her Majesty the Empress knew about this. She knew about everything, but why then did the Emperor only find out about it now? The woman said that when she found out, Parisa's past didn't seem so suspicious to her, and wasn't it ultimately up to her to decide who to appoint as a personal maid? Nishi said that at least the minimum hiring requirements should be met after all. Parisa asked if it was a problem that she was from Dunamis, to which the Duchess replied that she was asking the stupidest questions. A foreign maid, trying to pass for a local with such a dossier, ended up taking the place closest to Empress Lantius. Even if the lady were the most ordinary worker, this is unacceptable. Who knows what she could do with such powers? The incident with the maids is direct confirmation of this. The blonde told her brother that a murder had taken place in the palace. There had been a minor altercation between the maid and Parisa Minsel the day before, and the maid, who was detained during the investigation of the incident, was found dead. There was an attempt to kidnap her, and as a result, the male guards who were holding her in custody were also injured. The pink-haired girl was too angry at how Nishi turned all this around. There were no more doubts for the girl. What happened today was Nisha's machinations. She probably found out everything about her a long time ago. That's why she didn't use this information to try to win him over to her side. The woman had kept it until now, to use it as a lever of pressure in a similar situation. In the end, Nishi even got rid of the carriage thief. She is much more terrible than Minsel could have imagined. The emperor said that it was impossible to write off such a chain of tragic events as an accident. It was necessary to interrogate the servant Parisa and find out who was behind all these horrors. Here, the question of the safety of the imperial family arises. Blue-Eyed asked if they really thought that by detaining her, they would ensure the safety of the imperial family, since that was certainly not enough, and if the emperor did not think that hasty conclusions were disastrous in the current situation. The lady said that when she was applying for a job at the labor exchange, she saw an advert for maids and immediately applied. It only specified competencies, but there was not a word about the place of work. The only requirement for hiring was aristocratic origin, and the brunette did not lie or conceal anything. Blue Eyes may have come here from Dunamis, but she was born into a noble family of the Lantius Empire, and after the interview, the lady ended up in the palace and worked as an ordinary maid. While Parisa was already working there, by the will of the chief chamberlain, she was redeployed to the position of personal servant to Her Majesty. In this regard, the assumption that she has bad intentions is unfounded. Although this is still quite possible, nevertheless, the girl thinks that it would be fair to begin the investigation by interrogating the chamberlain, who was the one who chose and appointed the lady to the position. The brunette then said not to worry, but they would consider themselves even with Merget. The Duchess noted that the maid with whom the lady had a conflict and everyone who tried to harm her were dead. All this was not an absurd coincidence. This is another trick of someone's. They wanted to set the girl up. The same thing happened in the Imperial Palace. As soon as the blue-eyed girl felt that something was wrong, they immediately tried to shut her up. Still, that one servant of Her Majesty the Empress, doesn't it seem to His Majesty that in this situation, she personally is a rather dubious target? The girl asked to think about it. Finally, someone appeared who, for the first time in a long time, pleased Her Majesty. There is a man who passionately wishes to harm Her Majesty, and therefore tries to get rid of the only servant. With her gaze, Parisa declared that she would never submit to the will of the Duchess of Nisha. The woman responded that they would look into this further and investigate. The sister informed her brother that, whatever the case, they could not allow this servant to remain in the palace any longer. In the end, this whole show is just to drive the girl away. Whether she committed a crime or not is completely unimportant. She's trying to get the lady out of the palace in any way possible, and that is why she questions her competence. She wants everything to go back to how it was before, so that after her departure, the Empress can live as if she does not exist at all. The woman told her husband that she had been watching Parisa for quite some time. Parisa fulfilled all the whims of the Empress, and never even once resisted. As befits a personal servant, she always remained on the side of her mistress and worked hard for her. That's why the pink-haired girl didn't consider her origins a problem. Her Majesty began to convince the Emperor that her personal servant was not the least bit suspicious. He understood how his dear wife felt, but they really didn't know anything about her. They didn't even know what she had been doing since returning to Lantius. Everything said about this maid was true. That was why the old man couldn't leave her near his woman. The lady screamed loudly that she did not want anyone but her to take the place of her personal servant. His Majesty reminded the woman that she had previously changed about 20 maids. After all, if the Empress doesn't like anyone, she knows that it's not at all necessary to hire a new personal servant. It turns out that he knows how many maids this woman has had. Of course, he knows about the conflict between his mother and aunt. The real reason why the Empress was in such a terrible state all this time was because Her Majesty was always advised to surrender. If you don't want to, then a man is not obliged to do anything. There is no reason to worry. There is nothing easier than to simply give up. That is why Her Majesty has not held any tea parties or balls since then, and her obligations have been taken over by other people. She had lost the will to live, and all her courage, and had become, in fact, a bird locked in a cage. And that was how they treated the Empress all this time. People were constantly whispering that the Empress was childish, incapable of taking risks. But they have no idea what this really means for Her Majesty. Parisa knows that one day the moment will inevitably come when she will have to leave. However, she can't leave her now. Suddenly, Princess Joanna and the Crown Prince appeared before His Majesty the Emperor. The blonde asked what business the Crown Prince had here, and what brought the princess here. He personally asked Her Highness for an escort. The man and the girl are here to vouch for Mother's personal servant, Parisa Minzel. The brunette can confirm the identity of Parisa Minzel, who is here, saying that she is a person who can be trusted with the Empress. They had met the girl in Dunamis before. Parisa was an honest and worthy knight, a person who values sincerity and purity of thoughts in people, and therefore cannot hide insidious intentions in her soul. Her Highness said that since she was a knight, couldn't she then be trusted to work as a servant? The blonde said that the princess did not understand anything, because they would have to be most careful now. No matter how much they worry about their safety, in the course of life, a person too often finds himself in situations where he is completely defenseless. The princess understands as well as they do how dangerous it is to leave a servant with incredible strength near you. Nishi was right. The imperial family would have more serious problems if this maid turned out to be a spy from Dunamis. The woman objected, because the fact that she was now alive and well and sitting here with them was proof that Parisa was safe. Minzel literally saved the pink-haired girl's life during the carriage incident, and when she passed out at the ball, she carried her out of the ballroom in her arms. And the brunette had long ago confessed to the Empress that she was a knight. Her Majesty knew about everything and still kept Parisa by her side. Finally, the time has come for His Highness to speak. The man was the first to find out that Parisa had previously been a knight. As soon as he found out everything, he conducted an interrogation. The blonde had no problems with Parisa Minzel's personality. He can guarantee this on behalf of the Crown Prince. Since the Empress herself, the Crown Prince, and even a foreign princess are ready to vouch for her, then she can be trusted. To this, Nishi stated that not everyone trusts this maid, and all because the blue-eyed one is simply a liar. The prince decided to check with the girl herself, just in case, whether she was a spy. The Duchess said that the personal servant would be able to deceive absolutely everyone, and if doubt had not arisen in them, no one would have known that she was a knight. If they hadn't exposed her brazen lie, she would have hidden her identity for the rest of her days, becoming a maid in the imperial palace. But why? The old man understood Nisha's fears, but the Empress and Crown Prince believed her. The prince agreed that people could lie about many things, but honesty and nobility of character could not be hidden. Why does the Duchess so stubbornly evade the truth? Perhaps it is because Nishi has a personal grudge against Parisa. Therefore, the woman wants to send Parisa outside the palace. Not long ago, at a bride fair that his aunt had organized especially for the Crown Prince, the man had the honor of dancing only with the now-present Princess Joanna, and he believed that by doing so, he had expressed in someone else's soul his hope for a romantic relationship between him and Her Highness. In this case, the blonde understood her intention to study the princess's immediate circle, and therefore it is not surprising that everyone had suspicions regarding the identity of the princess's close friend, Parisa, because, as is known, she is also the Empress's personal servant. It was absolutely natural for them to be overly cautious, and what's more, it turns out that Minzel was once a knight of a neighboring kingdom. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the green-eyed man wanted, among other things, to clarify one point, because initially he had no intention of getting closer to the princess in any way other than a friendly manner. In other words, their meeting was caused by a great misunderstanding. Apparently, the lady's troubles have only increased due to this terrible murder in the palace. As far as the princess knows, the lady still has to talk to the prince during interrogation. The prince asked for help in such a hurry, and yet she responded, "The man wants to thank Her Highness again for everything, by the way. How did he even come up with the idea to bring Joanna as a guarantor?" As far as the blonde knew, the girl had never officially met her before the ball. However, the princess somehow sided with Parisa in the incident with the servants. There must be a reasonable explanation for this. That is why the Crown Prince assumed that they were more than just acquaintances. By the way, the lady was informed that the Knight of Bologna left Lantius in a hurry yesterday. The lady asked if he would be the only one conducting the interrogation, to which he replied positively, saying that, in general, the investigation was completed. Claude had made sure that it was a simple formality. To begin with, it was worth discussing the day of the murder of the maid Pei. Based on what they know, The lady was in the palace with other maids. Accordingly, she has an ironclad alibi. Furthermore, as far as the property is concerned, no traces of large sums of money being exchanged were found, and therefore no one is considering the option of a contract killing. In other words, the man sees that there are no grounds for accusing his personal maid, and therefore the lady is free. The prince began to mock, saying that his mother was saving on Parasoy, asking if she really did not want to move to his palace. The brunette said that her father was the second son of Minzel. He once met her mother, a citizen of Dunamis, and immigrated there. Soon her uncle died. He was the first son. He was supposed to inherit the army, so the title was eventually inherited by the girl's father, already a citizen of the kingdom. There was simply no point in further discussing family matters. The lady had not maintained contact with her parents for a long time, all because they succumbed to pressure from the authorities and wanted to give away their daughter. In fact, the blue-eyed princess felt terrible pressure from her, so she completely stopped communicating with her family. The lady could not tell the prince anything about the crown princess because it would cause a lot of problems. The blonde decided to end on this note because his mother was probably waiting. The green-eyed man wished for a new meeting, hopefully in a different environment from the current one. Until now, the girl's world has been extremely primitive. She is a knight of Bologna, and therefore must find her duty and strictly follow it. Parisa feels her purpose 100% and is perfectly aware that her whole life is in it. She is sure of this, but then why is there this painful discord in the girl's soul? Minzel remembered the one who believed that they could handle it, saying that now they were the knights of Bologna, they would work shoulder to shoulder. The blue-eyed girl's heart was left far behind, along with the right to stand next to her. There's a whole mess going on in the Empress's palace right now. Only when the maiden met him in person did she become convinced that all those rumors among the nobles were lies. Nora had met truly bad people, and this was not Her Majesty. The Empress is stunningly beautiful, and the designer wanted to make her even more beautiful. By the way, Parisa, of everything she told the girl, there was only one thing that was unclear to her. The green-headed one asked what the Duchess of Arras was really pursuing. Aristocrats are no strangers to power struggles, however. Such feuds are usually provoked by the desire to extract at least some benefit. So what does she ultimately achieve by harassing Her Majesty behind everyone's back? The Empress herself seems to have no idea. The pink-haired girl reported that the Crown Prince was requesting a visit this afternoon. In this case, the woman asked her personal servant to convey her gratitude to the prince. Be that as it may, only the Empress has the right to decide what to do with her personal servant. Nishi was too worried about the safety of the imperial family. It seemed that her feelings really took hold of her. The Duchess said she owed His Majesty an apology. The woman began to cry, afraid of losing her only faithful servant. The Emperor was surprised by this attitude towards a simple servant, because, moreover, was his wife not at all embarrassed by her position. She really is quite suspicious. But the maid and the former knight, the man faced such a situation for the first time. The lady told her husband how Nishi hated her and was plotting against her. He promised to talk to his sister, and even though things aren't going smoothly between them and the lady has doubts, one can't blame Nishi for everything. The Emperor said that the Empress should not hold on to these emotions. Her Majesty was hysterical because the man thought he understood and was making her endure it for too long. Parisa thought that even the most beautiful flowers die in stagnant water. The maid approached her mistress and hugged her sharply because Her Majesty was forced to endure all this. And time after time, she couldn't even cry like a human being. The brunette said that if the Duchess was tormenting her, and if she was having a hard time, she shouldn't endure it, because the Empress could leave them all at any moment. If only she became happier, then the maid would leave this place. And he will also follow his mistress, no matter what she decides for herself. Blue-Eyed offers Her Majesty a divorce, if only she herself wants it. To be honest, the woman had thought about divorce more than once, but since they have children, she does not consider it as an option. Although anything would be better than drying up here completely. As Minzel had said before, no matter what happened, she would always be on her mistress's side. Whatever choice she makes, the lady will be there, protecting her from anxiety. The blonde asked what Parisa was thinking so deeply about. By the way, Her Majesty asked me to convey her gratitude to the man. The lady would also like to ask you about something. Is it possible that the prince knows what the Duchess of Arras is trying to achieve? Perhaps he has at least some idea as to what is the reason for such blatant hatred. The woman screamed that 6 years had already passed since the birth of the child. How much time had passed? So why had she still not recovered? The lady promised to definitely find a way to cure her friend. She asked Nishi to fulfill one of her requests. Auntie and the Empress were very close with the deceased, and of course with his own mother. When the prince was 6, his biological mother died. 6 years later, the emperor married again. It turns out that she is unhappy with the very fact that the emperor married again. However, the situation has taken too serious a turn. There is clearly something else going on here. Besides, she didn't lay a finger on the emperor. Only the current empress is suffering. There must be something they don't know much about. Whatever the reason, if the Duchess's resentment does not go away, she will continue to test Parisa. Be that as it may, this incident turned out to be out of the ordinary. If something like this happens again, no one will be able to avoid an investigation, not even Auntie. Well, they will first sort out what has already happened. The maid who set up the girl and the criminals who tried to kidnap her in the city center were poisoned. The investigation established the facts of the poison's effect on the body. The prince interrogated witnesses and identified the main suspect. At the moment, the culprit has been identified as a guard of the Empress's palace. The guard assigned to duty at the place where the maid Pei was being held, and it was there that the poisoned water was discovered by the Countess. According to their version, the suspect gave up his post and then visited the would-be kidnappers in their prison cell. The criminal pulled one of them out of the cell and offered the others wine. It's a shame, but this option is not excluded either. In addition, it was revealed that the guardsman had a large gambling debt. The outcome is obvious. The man couldn't believe it. This bastard worked so close to the imperial family. He should have been checked 100 times before being hired. The brunette dared to remind him that she too had been assigned to serve the Empress. She was in fact a knight of a foreign kingdom. By the way, regarding this, the prince also took measures. Henceforth, the lady need not worry about her safety. No one really threatened the blue-eyed one, except perhaps the other maids in the Duchess of Eris's clique, who were ready to tear her to pieces at any moment. So if His Highness is truly worried, then approval will be enough. Whatever you say, it is. I will have to confront the Duchess of Eris more than once. At these words, the blonde chuckled, saying that Parisa was amazingly strong, and also grateful and immensely beautiful. The lady felt that their conversation had run its course, so she decided to leave. The man asked her to call him by name, but she only apologized and left. She has been incredibly lucky until now. Just recently, the staff in the Empress's palace was completely renewed. Generally speaking, the chamberlain did not check the documents very carefully, but Parisa tried very hard and gave advice when hiring new people, so the organization will go quickly. Leaving the room, the maid clutched her chest, not understanding what this impudent crown prince was doing. After all, no matter how many times she had already refused him, it wouldn't hurt the blonde to listen to people at least a little. Walking up to Her Majesty, the lady discovered Nora with scissors in her hands and a very unfriendly smile. She said that the Empress urgently needed a new dress, but she did not have time to develop a design and sew it from scratch. Her Majesty would do better to have the silk pleating she mentioned instead of the lace embroidery. Noticing the girl's arrival, the pink-haired girl said that she really wanted to finish all the preparations before her arrival. The woman was preparing for tomorrow's ball, planning to appear suddenly, so no one yet knows that the Empress has accepted the invitation. She stated that she was going there alone because Paresu didn't need her there. The lady recently reflected that she realized that the maid would not be able to look after her forever. She shouldn't rely too much on the brunette. Besides, it's time to do something for myself. As the personal servant of Her Majesty the Empress, Parisa has already done a lot for her. Perhaps that is why the woman still comes to cry on occasion. Now she is absolutely calm. It is clear that Her Majesty has thought everything through carefully. One way or another, there is no need to worry. Even if the ball is truly grand, it is unlikely that Nishi will appear there. The Empress promised to show people what she was worth. And also, while Minzel was away, Her Majesty had already prepared everything herself, so it is possible and necessary to believe in her. The desire for independence is wonderful, but, of course, for some reason the girl's soul felt too sad. It was high time to check how things were going in the palace. The brunette asked Daisy to take the servants to help and change Her Majesty's bed. Parisa was informed that they had a visitor and that she should come out and see for herself. Seeing His Highness the Crown Prince, the lady was not at all surprised. She asked why the man had come uninvited, since his arrival had put the new servants out of action. The heir asked to join him, because despite the fact that the girl was at work, it was the prince's request. Parisa has already refused him so many times, but he continues to get closer to her so persistently. The maid assumed that the man had come to tell her that there had been progress in the investigation, but this turned out to be an incorrect judgment. In fact, the blonde man had simply not visited his mother for a long time and wanted to find out how she was doing. He said that he had no idea that the Empress planned to be absent today, but this was a stupid lie, because the prince is aware of even the most insignificant trifle-biting palace affairs. Besides, he has something to do with the blue-eyed one. He thought that the lady might not like something so burdensome, even awkward, and yet the blonde dared to ask the girl to become his model for the painting. He said that at the exhibition in the Imperial Palace, he was obliged to exhibit his painting, so the green-eyed man was thinking about painting a portrait, but he didn't know whose. The man spent a lot of time thinking and came to the conclusion that the brunette was perfect. It was up to her to decide. The prince couldn't force Parisa, nothing could be done. The heir said that it was all nonsense. He would just be a little sad. There are no good reasons to refuse, and the man played on my pity well. More importantly, Parisa almost forgot something very important. If His Highness paints a portrait of a servant, his drawing will evoke rather contradictory feelings. One day the knight was asked what her purpose was, to which she replied that she could not say. Many keep this a secret, because it is a person's lifelong duty. Let's say that her purpose is to help her neighbor. It turns out that she is obliged to dedicate her life to people, but such a purpose without a specific goal can be interpreted in different ways. In other words, the world is full of cunning scoundrels. Get mixed up with one, and her sincere desire to help will turn into irreparable evil. Destiny is a path prepared by fate, but those who want to get them sometimes do not disdain even the most vile people. Be that as it may, the temptation is strong. One should not turn off the path under any circumstances. The lady looked worried, so the blonde asked what was bothering her. Does she really doubt his skills? The man admitted that the first time he saw such an amazing smile on her face was when the girl laughed at his work. Still, a newcomer like Parisa was no match for him as a model, but that didn't matter. The blonde just wanted to draw a blue-eyed girl, and he thought that watercolors would be a good way to capture her clear, sky-like eyes. It turns out that the heir remembers perfectly well what she told him then. He repeated that he would do everything, no matter what happened, to get Minsel's consent. When the lady tried to object, the man said that he could not take his eyes off the girl. And His Highness understands that the brunette also cannot take her eyes off him. Whatever the prince felt, the maid had already decided everything for herself long ago. But time after time, in his eyes, the lady clearly saw what he felt. And Parisa doesn't even have the courage to look at the blonde. Feelings are like light ripples on the water, but once they are disturbed, everything that was hidden deep inside will come to the surface. However, the girl consciously does not give in to her feelings. There is a reason for her stubbornness. She doesn't just reject His Highness, and therefore it doesn't matter what she feels. The green-eyed man just wants to trust the brunette with his feelings, so that she would simply accept them and he doesn't ask for more. Minsel's purpose is to protect and defend one person, and the girl will never dare to abandon him. Then the man believes that he is obliged to help his beloved. If, by fulfilling her duty, the maid becomes free from everything for which she is responsible, then perhaps the man will finally be able to experience her true feelings. For some reason, right now, Parisa can't come up with an excuse to escape. The men discussed the fact that there was a case, that someone really was hanging around here, but no one returned. Perhaps, as soon as he was declared wanted, the unknown person disappeared. Even if he had shown up here, the man would have reported it to him immediately. The prince asked if she would like to look at his work. In fact, the lady recognized herself, because he was painting her portrait. The blonde tried his best to convey the depth of her eyes in his work. Now that the matter was finished, Parisa could return to the palace. The lady will have no other reason to stay. The brunette had already gotten used to the fact that, as usual, he opened his heart to her and kept trying to get as close as possible. Perhaps he was afraid that she might find it burdensome. The girl asked Her Majesty if anything had happened at the ball, but nothing special had happened. The brunette offered the woman a little snack. The apples that the blue-eyed one peels for the pink-haired one are for some reason always so tasty, but that's because they are the best varieties, the kind that are only supplied to the imperial family. The lady gave a piece of apple to the woman and asked her to tell what happened at the ball, but nothing terrible really happened. They all behaved extremely politely and friendly towards the Empress. The ball was given at the residence of the Marquis of Andone. Since this place enjoys the favor of the imperial person, the influence of Nishi does not extend to it. But even despite this, the guests' glances towards Her Majesty were feigned. At the ball, she appeared as a seductress, captivating the emperor with her beauty. Her Majesty could do nothing with that face, but the lady understands why her mistress is so worried. It was hard to believe that she had to endure such an attitude, no matter how you look at it, and the fact that the woman is beautiful cannot be disputed. Lately, the pink-haired girl often shows her weak side to the maid. She finally began to rely on her personal servant. The lady stated that if Parisa was careless, She would find herself in exactly the same situation, so she should not fall for his dirty tricks under any circumstances. She, frankly, thought that he was not interested in girls at all, and in general that he had special preferences. The Empress said that she knew that the brunette had secretly escaped from the palace and had even put on makeup, and after that, she claimed that she had nothing to do with the prince. Blue-Eyed said that if His Highness called her, it was only for business, and she would always be entirely on the side of the lady. Parisa swore that the Empress would always be her priority, and that she only wanted her well-being and wanted her to be happy. Doesn't Her Majesty know what her maid really feels? The princess would like to stay a little longer. She will miss Parisa very much, but they still have to meet Joanna. The girl presented Her Highness with a gift from Her Majesty. The box contained a tea set and flower tea. Her Majesty is still unwell. She has not yet gotten rid of the fatigue accumulated at the ball. The princess was very sorry. Then she asked to convey to her also her wish for a speedy recovery. It would be wonderful if they had the opportunity to drink tea together as soon as possible. As soon as the brunette returns to Olagot, she will write a letter to the girl. Her Highness forgot to tell you that she had bought a painting with a portrait of her friend. Since the guests of honor were allowed to work a day earlier, it would be a sin not to take advantage of this opportunity. If the painting is presented to the people at auction, Paresu will certainly be recognized, Dunamis' people for sure. And then, Paresa will definitely die at the hands of Princess Dunamis. That's why Joanna bought it before the auction started, even though it was her last money. The girl then asked to take care of this painting for the last time, because the most reliable way is to burn it. But the yellow-eyed one refused to do this, because she paid a lot of money for this painting. She definitely plans to keep it as a memento of their friendship. Minzel tried to take the painting back, but Olagot bought it with her own money. It was not an original painting at all, and besides, it was just a copy. As it turns out, there are 2 paintings in the world with the face of the Empress's personal servant. There is no need to worry about the portrait, because the girl will definitely take care of it. And again, Minzel has problems. Why didn't the prince mention that they plan to put the painting up for auction? First, it's worth making sure that everything is really so. The lady didn't plan to see him in the near future. However, the prince will not get away with this. His Highness asked why Paresa had come to see him. Could it be because of the presentation of her portrait at the auction? And it seems that the prince himself did not suspect anything about it. Did the blonde understand correctly that this was planned from the beginning? The man had committed to auctioning one of his paintings and ended up simply giving away his best work. Besides, it is far from the most realistic. The blonde decided that there would be no problems, and nevertheless, it is enough to recognize a girl in the portrait. If rumors started to spread that the crown prince had depicted an ordinary servant girl in the painting, how did he even plan to deal with them? In conclusion, the green-eyed man could only say that he knew for sure that Princess Joanna would boil her out. Moreover, that painting is just a copy. The man did not plan to sell or exhibit the original. It seems to Perez that it would not be difficult for him to draw another copy for display at an exhibition or for sale. But why would he need it? And so the brunette asked His Highness to give her the original. The blonde asked if the princess had said how much she had paid for the copy. This painting cost 300,000 nira. Needless to say, the original is much more expensive than the copy. The blue-eyed woman objected, because this painting was a portrait of her. Asking to sell it to her for 200,000 nira, she would pay him a portion of the cost every month. The brunette still understood that this was a lot of money for her, and it would take her some time to pay it off in full. In the meantime, she asks him to hold on to the painting and not sell it to anyone. The girl said that she would not keep His Highness waiting long. Now, until the lady buys the portrait, she is sure that it will be waiting for her in the palace of the Crown Prince. Her Majesty has been very busy lately, and Parisa doubts that she will be able to help in any way. Walking to her house, the maid saw a tall guy trying to figure out who he was. The girl saw this carriage for the first time, and the coat of arms was also unfamiliar to her, as was some mysterious guy next to her. Although, no matter how handsome this stranger is, it is difficult to surpass the Crown Prince. The lady decided to ask who he was and whether she could help him in any way. The lady had never heard of the name Bannox, and so she assumed that the Bannox family had no dealings with Nishi. If she had urgent business in the palace, then the servant decided to accompany him, but it was not worth it, because he had no more business in the imperial palace. The man just came to say hello. Most likely, this is an acquaintance of Her Majesty. Parisa has never heard of this particular person, so for what purpose did he come? Blue-Eyed suggested that if he was an acquaintance of the Empress, then it would not be better for him to go inside. The brunette said that they hadn't seen each other for a very long time, most likely about 10 years. Just recently, he met Her Majesty at a ball. The man was worried by the unhealthy color of her face. In this case, the stranger decided to leave the girl alone. He asked to be kind and keep the fact that he was seen here a secret, so as not to disturb the woman unnecessarily. The maid burst into the Empress's room and screamed that she knew the woman was hiding something. The lady had literally just bumped into Bannock's on the way to the palace. He said that he was worried about the pink-haired girl's well-being, since at the last ball, he was embarrassed by the color of her complexion. The girl asked what happened between them. It seems to be her old lover. The woman remembered that this marquis had actually courted her in her youth. She had been thinking about a lot of things that day, and she believes that is why she looks sick. But what if Her Majesty had not become Empress at all? How often does the Empress wonder what if she had chosen a different path? The personal maid asked me to believe her, because she sometimes thinks about it too, and there's nothing wrong with it. She began to worry that something terrible had happened to Parisa in Dunamis, at her service. The brunette said that she ran away because there was a man living in Dunamis who was putting too much pressure on her. Now it became clear why Minzel so diligently avoided official events. But there is no need to worry, as the Empress said, because she is safe in her palace, the woman will try to do everything possible to protect her personal servant. In the place the girl left, she left behind everything she had achieved throughout her life. But she didn't regret anything. She got something much more valuable. Parisa found her purpose and the person she should protect. The girl no longer needs to follow the path she chose. Now she will only move forward. The pink-haired girl received a letter from Countess Boucher. Something happened in Bush's domain, and therefore she was forced to leave. It seems that the girl contacted her to notify her of her return. There was a strange thing in the letter, and the woman asked to look at it. It was written there that unfortunately, upon her return, she fell ill and her health was failing. Therefore, Bush was forced to postpone her attendance at social events in the capital for an indefinite period. It was really strange that the letters were uneven, tilted in different directions, which was too unlike her. The Empress was sure that something bad had definitely happened. Countess Boucher remained a supporter of the Empress, even after Nishi returned from her journey, and the girl believes that it is not surprising that the Duchess has set her sights on her. The personal maid volunteered to meet with the Countess. The groom said that it was none of his business, but the devil knows what was going on in the outskirts. The girl thanked him for his concern, but everything was fine because she was not afraid of bandits. The girl, in disguise, introduced herself as the personal servant of Her Majesty the Empress, who had arrived at the invitation to meet with Count Boucher. The man was glad that Parisa had arrived because the Countess was waiting for her. He informed his beloved that Lady Minzel had come to see her. The Countess was incredibly happy that the girl had come to see her. They decided that in the letter she was asking for help, they immediately sent her to them. The Countess would not risk inviting her openly. She was afraid that they would find out about it. The green-haired girl asked if everything was okay with the Empress, if anything bad had happened to her. The lady knew that something had definitely happened, but nevertheless, the palace was unsettled. The girl believed that she had a hard time too. She felt sorry that she had to go through such horror, asking her to tell her more in detail. The Countess shared that she had been threatened. Things were going well at the estate, but troubles befell them on the way back to the capital. The woman was terribly scared, because they almost died because the wheel broke on the road. But it didn't end there. When they stopped at the hotel, they discovered a robbery. Someone had been rummaging through the Countess's things and had made a terrible mess. Later, it turned out that not a single thing was missing, but Parisa had also been through something similar. All of this was done with the aim of causing her anxiety. But the troubles did not end there. It happened the day before arriving in the capital. At night, in the hotel where they were staying, a man made his way into the lady's bedroom and put a knife to her throat. She was shaking at the very thought that the girl could actually die, but he suddenly spoke to her. The man said to think carefully before doing something stupid again. But literally behind the wall, the servants were sleeping. But he still managed to get to the Countess. No one noticed anything, and the thief left no trace. The lady trusted her ladyship, asking her to calm down. Nishi really crossed the line. Until now, she hid her true face under a mask and did not dare to go beyond the limits. She acted with caution for the sake of her reputation. Her Majesty the Empress suffered, gradually wasted away, and could not say a word against it. Nishi had not been able to quietly poison and hide for 10 whole years. So why did she suddenly resort to direct threats? Could it be that all because Parisa gave Her Majesty the courage to resist, that is why she began to act so openly? The maid realized that the Count and Countess had been through a lot, so she concluded that they should have a good rest, and she, in turn, would convey their words to Her Majesty. Still, if this was someone's evil intent, if someone wanted to use a woman to scare Her Majesty, then she has no idea what else she will face in the future, but she knows exactly what her heart tells her. Countess Boucher, contrary to other people's expectations, is far from being a weak, timid noblewoman. She has a wonderful reputation, an aristocrat from head to toe. In a good sense, she did not give up. On the contrary, she strengthened her position as a supporter of the Empress. The further from the palace, the less likely it is that their performance will be discovered. It was forbidden to make noise in front of the palace. One man approached the lady and shared his umbrella with her. This man turned out to be the person who was involved in the carriage incident. His friend, a guard, led him out of the cell by the arms, which is why he followed Parisa. He really needed to talk to her about something. He begged the girl to listen to him. The maid warned him that if he lied or wasted her time, she would personally cause him trouble. The man swore that he would tell everything he knew, so if the girl found his story useful, he asked her to spare him. Ralph said that he had spent his entire life doing small errands and taking jobs in the alleys. The guard who helped the red-haired man escape is called Morgan. They met in a gambling house and then became friends. Morgan was a risky guy in general. He often took jobs from big shots, and then he got his friend involved. One thing was bad. Morgan didn't know his limits. He wanted to get rich from the games and kept raising the stakes. The outcome of such great excitement was obvious. The man ended up deep in unpayable debt and needed a new job. And the kidnapping of a maid from the palace seemed like a suitable thing to them, some girl, and even without guards. So they decided that it was a piece of cake. They were sure that everything would go smoothly, and there would be no punishment. The group was assembled personally by Ralph, and things were progressing well. Well, and then the maid herself knows, because she turned out to be that servant. That day, the entire group, including the red-haired one, was arrested for attempted kidnapping. And a couple of days after being taken into custody, Morgan showed up at the prison. He gave him a change of clothes and promised to take him outside the palace. But things took a serious turn. They will be paid the promised fee. They will take the money and go abroad, sit there for some time, and then decide what to do next. Only then did the man finally realize everything. He realized that everything went completely differently than he and his friend had planned. The boys left the palace safely, and in the city Morgan told him to wait until he returned with the money. He was his friend, and Ralph had no doubt of him. But something was bothering him, and the man secretly followed him. There, the mercenary saw something he shouldn't have. Ralph was so scared that he forgot about poor Morgan, realizing that for the nobles, they were not people, and that people like them could be gotten rid of. Blue-Eyed realized that the villain killed the man without hesitation, and that same night, the man ran away and hid. The red-haired man found out that all his comrades who remained in the catacombs were dead the very next day. The mercenary was the only one who managed to survive. That day, the guy was especially careful even with his breathing. So it turns out that the girl is in the crosshairs from both sides, wanted by the imperial family and that same aristocrat. The world, hidden in the darkness and dirt of the capital, is literally in the palm of Ralph's hand. He knows almost every corner here and remembers where he can hide if he suddenly gets into a tight spot. But what will happen to him in a completely unfamiliar place? He had not the slightest idea. Therefore, he decided that it would be better to lie low somewhere here. It seems like there are a lot of places in the capital that only people like him know about. Baron Cowell is a popular animal among aristocrats, and he bought his title with their money. The man followed him and found out that he had recently become a regular at one place, namely, in the mansion of the Duchess of Arras. Parisa said that the already familiar stranger had drawn his lucky ticket. A page arrived to deliver a message to Monsieur Claude and His Highness. Lady Minzel told him that she would wait for the prince at the back door, and as soon as possible. The crown prince intervened in their conversation, saying that they could talk here too. He looked at the boys and ordered them to tell him everything. The girl said that this was one of the kidnappers, their old friend, who escaped with the guardsmen. He was the only one who managed to survive in this whole mess. The blonde ordered Claude to take Ralph out because he needed to talk to Parisa. The blonde told him that they had encountered him when she was away on business outside the palace and decided, frankly, that someone was stalking her. Blue Eyes said that there was an urgent matter and Her Majesty was worried, so she went to the Busha mansion alone. The man said that what would happen to the maid was that no one would help her because she was disguised. But the lady had to be careful. Besides, she was not one to suffer silently. He certainly knew that. Parisa herself was aware of the fact that she was an unusual servant. The heir realized that his aunt had gone too far, but something about this situation was bothering the maid. She is certainly quite close to the Empress, and yet she is only a servant. Even if Nishi were caught harassing some palace maid, it would hardly result in any serious trouble for her. And yet, The Duchess decided to get rid of the small fry and eventually revealed herself. That was the point. Honor and reputation in high society are not empty words. Excessive interest is a bad sign, no matter what it is caused by. Therefore, the risks are completely justified. If she had no witnesses, even they, knowing the details, would not have been able to accuse her of anything. However, they now have a witness who saw Baron Cowell, and now they can conduct an official investigation. There is a chance to get evidence pointing to the Duchess's involvement. The case was quickly gaining momentum. What is Duke Eris doing at all, or is he satisfied with everything? The Duke is by nature a weak-willed and unsociable person. To top it all off, he is in poor health. Speaking of which, he hasn't shown his nose outside his country residence for more than 6 months. All power in the duchy is, in fact, concentrated in the hands of his aunt. Facts are facts, and the Duke is no help to them at all, since he has no right to vote. The Duchess skillfully takes advantage of the circumstances that have developed around her. The marriage was her personal initiative. The woman understood perfectly well that the Duke was not the one who would contradict her. The prince felt that it was time for him to return. The man said that when she reported to his mother, there was no need to report about the Duchess. It would be necessary to wait a little longer. She threatens Her Majesty, but the blonde asked to understand him. He was afraid that the Empress would not be able to control her emotions, and he wanted to protect her from rash actions. His Highness will try to quickly make inquiries about the Baron. First, he needs information about cases of interaction with the criminal world of the noble group. In that case, the blue-eyed one knew what could help them. The new maid, Annie, was pleased to meet her and would henceforth work in the Eastern Palace. Marie didn't understand how much bile there was in her social worker, and yet she had just recently received a letter. And what did she find so disgusting in this vile job that she dared to mock him so brazenly? The girl was going to endure it because she chose this path herself. She no longer wanted to be someone's pathetic puppet. A new maid approached the lady and was the first to speak to her. She said that she really hoped for further friendship with Marie. The Empress said that she was still haunted by Countess Boucher's letter, which her personal servant had given her. The Countess writes that she is slowly recovering from the robber's attack. Parisa reported that it was wonderful. As a result, the girl did not report to Her Majesty the whole truth about what had happened. According to her agreement with the Crown Prince, they would begin to act only after they received convincing evidence. They finally had a real chance to punish Nishi. Nishi is targeting Her Majesty, but the Empress is the only one who remains unaware. Of course, Parisa is ready to do anything if it will ensure the safety of her mistress, and yet she does not like all this. The woman received a guest, or rather, Viscount Patterson arrived. He was Her Majesty's father, but it seemed to the lady that he lived far from the capital. The Empress asked what brought the old man to the imperial palace. He reported that something had happened the day before in the estate, which is why he had been forced to come so suddenly, but everything had been resolved successfully earlier than they had planned. And then, there was no news from the woman for a long time, so the father thought it would be nice to see her. The man said that the other prince and princess have been growing up actively lately. All that is left for her in the current situation is to hold on tightly to her place next to the emperor. He also stated that Her Majesty's dress suited her. He believed that it had been tailored in a luxurious capital studio especially for a woman. The man heard that when working on a dress for a lady, the craftsmen spend long, sleepless nights. Just think, they couldn't even imagine such luxury before marriage. This marriage is a blessing for their family and nothing else. Parisa still couldn't understand why Her Majesty was so alarmed, and here, in fact, is the answer. Her father was a typical representative of the nobility, an authoritarian patriarchal society, quite prejudiced, people who were sure that a real lady must be elegant and modest. As far as the father knew, not long ago the personal maid was involved in an incident. However, the man had heard that His Majesty intended to drive her out of the palace. After all, he had warned her more than once. The highest virtue of true ladies is obedience, so the Empress is obliged to follow the will of the Emperor. He earnestly asked her, as a loving father, to be grateful and to remember more often the mercy shown by Her Majesty. The woman suddenly couldn't take it anymore and said that she got married to be happy, and she wouldn't give in, but she wouldn't tolerate this any longer. She said that the Empress was not just an obedient dog, submissively obeying the Emperor. My father said that a lady should be perfect in everything, grateful and refined to the point that it would be impossible to find a single flaw. This is not the kind of title that, once acquired, allows one to behave recklessly and take liberties. The man asked why, in her opinion, there were so many rumors circulating in society about the Empress's status. Suddenly, Her Majesty's father dropped a pig in his purse, and Parisa began to pick up the pieces. Thanks to her gift, Minzel determined that something was wrong. Taking him by the hand, the girl declared with confidence and fear that the Viscount had been poisoned. The lady asked him if he had been drinking anything unusual lately. The brunette thought that the only unusual thing was the tea, because he had received it as a gift, and besides, he had been told that it was good for his health. Parisa assumed that the Duchess of Eris had sent him this gift. The man admitted that he received foreign delicacies and wine from her. Nishi is the Emperor's younger sister and is an incredibly sensitive and caring lady. The Empress was angry to learn that her father had been in contact with the Duchess all this time. Lady Eris told him that due to some misunderstanding, they were not getting along well with Her Majesty, and she was extremely concerned about her reaction to the news of their communication with him. And yet she took care of everything and said that if anything happened, at any time, be sure to contact her for help. The man kept saying that Nishi was a role model, a real lady, and that instead of swearing in vain, a woman should follow her example. To this, Her Majesty shouted that the Duchess hated her. It wasn't enough for her to cut the pink-haired girl off from high society. She still does everything to make her and her loved ones suffer. And he, knowing about everything, communicates with her and so carelessly accepts gifts. Parisa clarified that the nobleman had been feeling unwell lately. He sleeps poorly at night, and his limbs sometimes go numb. The doctor also said that the symptoms were similar to poisoning. He will have to undergo treatment for about a month to completely remove the poison from his body. It was a dirty method, little known about it here, but in Dunamis the girl had heard of it. That wine, separately, has a beneficial effect on the body, but when mixed, you get pure poison, acting like a real poison. If things had turned out differently today, the Viscount would have been in big trouble. As the poison gradually paralyzes the limbs, the mind is the last to fade away. His Grace would eventually lose his mind and die. The Empress said that if her servant had not recognized the symptoms, her father would have died in terrible agony and no one would have been able to help him. She understood that this was exactly what the Duchess was trying to achieve. The woman forbade him to take a single step outside the palace until he fully recovered. If she wants to, Nishi can easily win over the people working in the Empress's palace. They need a person who is not under her influence. Blue-Eyed said that she would have to ask His Highness the Crown Prince for help. The Empress felt that he had been useful more often than ever lately. Now, looking back, the woman feels like the Crown Prince was the only one who took her side. The Empress was ready to sacrifice her title for the sake of revenge. It was humiliating. Should she really sit back and wait in silence? This is far from the first time something like this has happened. How much longer will they have to endure this? And yet, hasty actions are disastrous for them. Suddenly, this time, Nishi will still manage to catch Her Majesty in a trap. The Empress's heart has long been crippled, and these wounds cannot be healed. There is no one to tell about them, and no one to vent their anger on. Even if Nishi ever gets what she deserves, what will happen to what she has already done? Who will take responsibility for the pain and suffering that Her Majesty has brought? The maid said that she wanted to offer the pink-haired girl something, because she can no longer bear to see her mistress suffer. The little Empress and Nishi wove wreaths for each other. She congratulated the Duchess on her birthday. Lavia and Nishi have been best friends since they were little girls. The Duchess sat in the darkness in front of the window and thanked her late friend. Marquis Bannock said it was her truth. They discussed the plan they had been hatching for so long. The man congratulated her ladyship on her birthday. He also wished the woman endless glory. The Empress also appeared at the ball, wearing a soft pink dress. She congratulated the Emperor's sister on her birthday, apologizing for being late. The woman handed the lady a gift of wine as an apology. She asked to accept this glass out of respect for her. The blonde said she had a weak stomach, and the fact that her gift was a rather peculiar color embarrassed the Duchess. But does Nishi really think that this wine is poisoned? This is the very same wine that Her Majesty's father received from her as a gift. The woman said that, apparently, the Viscount did not like him. The Empress suggests ending their fascinating conversation here. From head to toe, Her Majesty doused her enemy with poisoned wine. The pink-haired girl shouted that she looked good. It suited her better. She asked without gratitude, because Nishi had already tried so hard for her. The personal maid asked how her mistress was doing, because she was always waiting for her in the corridor. And yet the lady did a great job, both her hair and her dress. Everything got wet. It turns out that His Majesty will find out about everything very soon. But the Empress felt neither anxiety nor fear, but only extraordinary lightness, and now the woman is truly happy. She realized for herself that she would never be the same again, and would never silently endure and swallow again. The Empress invited her butler, whom she had been waiting for so long. He didn't know what exactly had made her so angry, but it was Nisha's birthday. Ever since fate awarded the lady the title of the most noble lady of the empire, Her whole life has been filled with this dirty, ostentatious nobility. The nobility inherent in a graceful lady, the nobility of a kind, gentle, flower-like beauty, and finally, the nobility of the wise and generous empress. At first, the woman thought that all this somehow redistributed her significance. But this was a mistake, for false nobility and cheap virtues are fetters, a heavy burden placed on the shoulders of the weak. No matter how much evil Nishi said about her, the empress still considered it noble to endure it. Even though she herself suffered unbearably from this, Her Majesty silently swallowed the insults until the very end. Her ladyship said that for the past 10 years, Nishi had been ruining her birthday every year. So why doesn't the lady have the right to respond in kind? The emperor said that Nishi did not poison her father because he himself sometimes enjoys this wine. The duchess, of course, denies that another misunderstanding occurred, that she did not want it, and yet, because of what she did, the woman's father was poisoned. The man said that she was being overly pessimistic. He was sorry and understood perfectly well that something terrible almost happened. But Nishi, it turns out, asks the empress for forgiveness. So many words were said, and in the end, everything was as usual. The duchess, as always, apologizes to her, and she, as always, is told not to persist without reason. Even if the empress tells someone something, her words will not reach him. It seemed to His Majesty that the pink-haired girl had changed since the servant had appeared in the palace. He was still worried that she might be a bad influence on his wife. The man became even more convinced than before that she had no place in the palace, to which the woman cried out that it was not surprising that she had changed. It was only thanks to Parisa that she found her voice, and she will no longer remain silent. Does he really want to say that the empress, as in the future, must behave wisely, silently endure humiliation, and be patient? The empress declared that if this was how a wise and generous empress should behave, then she would rather become a stupid and ignorant woman. Suddenly, the sick father burst into the room, saying that he had something to tell His Majesty. He got down on his knees and said that it was his fault. He was a lousy father. He raised his daughter poorly. The emperor ordered him to rise from his knees and not interfere in this matter. Well, Minzel shouldn't have let him in here in the first place. Here and now, Erica is not his daughter. She is the emperor's wife and empress. This is His Majesty's last warning not to interfere. Erica's heart was heavy. It felt like she was trampling between the two of them. She dreamed that one day her pain would end. But she so hoped that one day things would certainly get better, if only she accepted the fate given to her from above and would believe and wait. But in the end, everything went differently, completely differently. Perhaps Nishi will have to leave the capital for a while again. Even though it was unintentional, in fact, she still poisoned Viscount Patterson. The emperor asked if this would make things any easier for his wife. But although His Majesty hears the words of the empress, he diligently ignores what she really feels. The woman asked why she should feel better then. After these words, Erica suggested that the emperor get a divorce. The man couldn't believe his ears. But if he is so inclined to openly ignore a woman, but completely trust Nishi, then she sees no point in them staying together. She announced that she was very tired, so she should be left alone. When they didn't listen to her once again, the wife shouted for them to leave, because while she was still the empress, these chambers were rightfully hers. So she asked them both to leave here right now.